I very often get asked what a fat quarter is, and on the list of materials to buy for the beginners course, I specify fat quarters or the linear length. One of the reasons that I have arranged with Sew and Fabric to produce kits for you is to try and take all of the kind of mythology out of this and the confusion out of this. But if you did want to buy your own materials, I'll just quickly explain what a fat quarter is to you. I'm making the assumption that as beginners, you've never bought any fabric before, and so it takes a little while to understand the language surrounding buying fabric and also what things you need to consider in terms of the way it's made and it's cut. So let's start right at the beginning. If you walk into a fabric shop, you will look at the racks of fabric and they will all be on rolls like this. You have your rolls of fabric. And you would choose your roll of fabric, take it to the front, and then the shopkeeper would roll it out on their cutting table, ready to cut whatever length it is you'd asked for. There'd be a ruler on the cutting table, and that would measure out metre lengths. So we've got start at 0, 1 metre, 2 metres. Then there would be half metres, and then in there would be quarter metres. So that's 1 metre 50 centimetres, 25, 75, 25, 75. If you were to ask them for a quarter metre of fabric, they would cut a strip at 25 centimetres long like that. That's called a thin quarter or a long quarter. You might be making an item that where the pattern piece goes slightly bigger than a quarter metre. Let's say you were making a dinner mat, placemat. You wouldn't be able to get that out of that 25 centimetre width. You need it to go over. But if you bought half a metre of fabric, you'd have a lot of excess that you wouldn't be using. Equally, you might find that the pattern on your fabric is larger. So you might have big flowers, say, all over your fabric, like this. And if you were buying a thin quarter, you wouldn't get as much of the pattern, or get very much of the pattern on that thin quarter. And this is where a fat quarter comes in. So going over to this side, if I measure out 1 metre, like that, a fat quarter is actually 1/4 of a metre, just like these are quarters of meters. So this is 1/4, 2/4, 3/4, 4/4. That makes up a whole square metre. This is a square metre here. On this side, we have a square metre, exactly the same as we have on this side. But on this side, we're going to quarter it this way. So this area of fabric here is the same in terms of area as this long quarter here, this thin quarter here. But this is called a fat quarter because the quarter has been made fatter, it's been made wider in order to be able to solve some of this issue, which may be that you want more surface area with pattern on it, or that you want a piece of fabric that is enough to take into an account this particular shape that you're cutting without having to buy a half metre. You're still only able to buy a quarter of a metre. You only need to buy a quarter of a metre. There are some other random cuts that come from the kind of American quilting tradition, but the one that we use most in this country is the fat quarter. Now, not every shop will sell all fabrics in a fat quarter measurement. It tends to be restricted to quilting fabrics because it's a quilting it's a quilting cut. But on the beginner's course, quilting fabric is the type of fabric that I advise you start with because it's inherently very, very stable. It doesn't move. If you think about the types of fabrics that your nightwear is made out of, it might be stretchy, it might be slippy, it might be slidey. those are not the fabrics that I would recommend for beginners to start with. And quilting fabric is ideal, absolutely ideal to start with, along with a good stable calico. So that's why I've partnered with Sew and Fabric St Austell to produce kits for you. So it takes all of the pain out of this question of fabric buying. But it also gives, hopefully this gives those of you that might want to buy your own fabric and choose your own very specific fabrics for these projects, hopefully this gives you an understanding of what it is you're looking for. Quilting shops and fabric shops will very often have fat quarters pre-cut, and they're about £2.50 each, I think. So they will have them pre-cut. You don't even have to ask them to cut, but if there are specific fabrics you want cutting, they will cut them into fat quarters for you. Feel free to ask any questions you want to. I just wanted to pop this in here to try and explain it for you, and to hopefully take some of the pain out of your fabric buying before we start next week.